Hi everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. I've moved to a new place, my room is still empty, so you're gonna have the empty room effect for the whole duration of this video. I'm planning on getting this settled, but it's gonna take a little bit while, so bear with me. A lot of things has happened while I was moving from one house to another, and especially with the liberation of Kherson, the biggest questions were what are gonna Russians do next and what Ukrainians are gonna do next. So firstly, let's cover some of the things around Kherson, and then we're going to talk about where the situation will go after that. So first thing that was kind of asked and questioned by a lot is where Russia will set the defensive line around Kherson after they move from Kherson north part to the south bank. The most important thing was questions, will Russia occupy essentially these two, how would you call them? Like semi-flooded areas, one might say. So like it's a land, but it's a land with a lot of smaller parts of the river flowing through them. And the truth is that Russia cannot really. So first geographic thing to keep in mind for us is that these areas here that I just showed, right, especially around this area, it's a kind of very wet ground area. So the problem with that is that once a person starts digging, after he starts digging for about half a meter or so, then the whole trench is going to start being overflown with water. So no kind of long-term proper trenches can be established in that area. That means the defensive line already needs to be positioned a little bit backwards, maybe closer to the road that goes here. I'm pretty sure you can see here like a road that's happening. So that is the first thing to keep in mind. Second thing to keep in mind, the coast of Dnipro, the higher coast, is actually on the right side. So where I'm drawing, that is on the north side of this Dnipro river in this area. The coast is a lot higher. What does this mean? That means a person can have maybe a couple of people, like a party can have just a couple of people overlooking Dnipro from like the high ground, and then report if they see any kind of activity on the water. So that is not a lot of usage of resources. For the Russians, they are on the lower part. And that thing that I just showed you, the one that you cannot dig the long-term trenches in, the problem with that additionally is that when Russians are looking at the water, they are not seeing the full water availability. They are seeing basically like a lot of bushes, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of like dirt and landmass, like a smaller landmass. They do not always have a clear line of sight. So for example, if there is some kind of night naval assault, that makes a lot of possibilities for the assaulting party to sneak into, especially if who is watching this is either some kind of a poorly trained personnel, or they don't have the necessary night equipment, you know, like night vision, thermal sights, and so on and so on. And especially because their positions needs to be a little bit further from the coast. So putting it all together, you can see already some kind of weaknesses, that this is not just a coastline that is easy to defend. The fact is that actually for Russians to have a proper oversight of this area of the front line is actually quite tough, because they need to have troops with proper rotation and proper motivation. So some kind of troops that can actually understand what the situation is. So just throwing in there some kind of conscripts that had no training would literally be a disaster. And then this might lead to some kind of a naval activities being very disruptive for the Russian army in the area. So which might open a whole plethora of problems, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Secondly, if they are supplied, then the question is, how do we then cover all of this? Because they will be completely inside of the essentially oversight from the higher ground, from the opposite coast, and can just be easily targeted by the artillery. So it's a very difficult position and a very tricky position for Russians to dig into. It's not impossible, but it's a difficult one. An important matter of discussion here, of course, is time. And this is where I'm going to stop for it right now and just keep whatever I said in mind, the whole 5 minutes of it. So what we have heard in recent news is that Ukrainians have advanced and made some naval assaults. We've heard that they're doing some attacks around the Kherson Peninsula. There's been also some kind of attacks around Hola Pristan, Oleshki, and so on. By now, you already start seeing what might be the issue. Now, with the Kherson Peninsula, it's a hard area also to defend, but by a whole plethora of things. I again will recommend you looking at the reporting from Ukraine channel. His tactical assessments, as always, are excellent. If you want to understand why Kherson Peninsula is important and why is it not as easy to hold and not as easy to oversee for Russians rather than for Ukrainians, please go watch his video. It's excellent. If you already watched this video from yesterday, then maybe just stick with me. So the problem is, why does this matter? Let's think about this way. Okay, if Ukraine does take, for example, Kherson Peninsula, if Ukraine does these naval assaults, take, for example, or secure some kind of ground in Hola Pristan, if Ukraine secures some kind of ground in Oleshki, why does it matter? Can Ukraine literally like start, transitioning to the other shore and have a proper stronghold? Well, no, by itself, but it might just a little bit because the situation. So let's talk about what happened. This is going to be a developing story and you'll understand what I'm going through. So after the liberation of Kherson, Russians felt very much encouraged because they were very happy because they got, okay, we got about 20 to 30,000 troops that are, while maybe somewhat demotivated because they are like, they've been retreating and they've been under fire for the past couple of months, but they are very professional troops. They are battle-capable, battle-hardened professional troops. So what happened is, we know that as soon as Russia started getting them out, by leaving only some of the maybe a little bit lower tier troops in the area that we know are now, even bodies are still being found in the Dnipro River. I guess it's a part of the agreement was also to like maybe get a couple hundred of Russians killed. That's probably part of the negotiated agreement between Russia and Ukraine that some people have been talking about. Yes, but besides that tangent, so the Russians thought it's like, hey, we got all these troops out. We instantly, like almost like within like couple of days and so on, like there were reports about the fact that Russian troops are appearing in Mariupol. That is far away. Like they're saying there's like coming troops like with VDV signs and so on. So it was obviously the troops from Kherson that came all the way from Kherson to Mariupol, and you don't have to understand too much to understand where they're going to be thrown at. They're going to be thrown at the Vuhledar area, and they're going to be thrown on the Avdiivka direction. That was the assumed position. The only kind of major Russian miscalculation that Russia did, which completely blew my mind because that was so obvious, is that Russia forgot that it does not have the initiative. It is Ukraine that still has the initiative. And as much as Russia wants to think that now they're going to, okay, we have all these troops and then we're going to throw them here, and then Ukraine will be forced to then, like relocate their troops to defend, and then we're going to, encircle them, yada, yada, yada. Whatever Russia thought is wrong. Why? Because Ukraine has the initiative. What happened is Russia has left around this area, we already know, quite poorly trained troops, like mobilized troops, and most of the battle-capable troops they have sent essentially to the Donetsk area, to the Donbass. So now there is a big dilemma here because there is a lot of assets that were in the area that now, first and foremost, and I'm going to switch to blue here because now it's going to be Ukrainian activity. So these are being struck by HIMARS now and field artillery because they were close. We also see naval assaults on the Kherson Peninsula. We see naval assaults to Hola Pristan. We see naval assaults across the river. And this creates a big problem for the Russians because they thought that, okay, we're just going to leave these guys that are, like poorly trained and just going to defend it. And now they're slowly but surely realizing it, that while maybe Ukraine cannot have like maybe right away a major major fight over river, just sending here poorly trained troops is essentially going to be almost like a Kherson 2.0. It's just going to be a meat grinder for the Russians here. So either they will need to establish the defensive line somewhere further from the field artillery of Ukrainians, which we actually now hearing that Russians are moving the field artillery away from this contact line, or they will need to send essentially the same troops that just exited Kherson, the battle-capable troops, to then kind of go to Melitopol or to Mariupol, and then from Mariupol go back to just kind of defend because they are the battle-capable troops. Because if Ukraine establishes certain bridgeheads and prepares some kind of operation, there is possibilities. I'm not saying that they should do it. It's still a bad idea by most analysts. But the point is, it creates a huge threat. So now Russia, whatever it does, even if it doesn't send their battle-capable troops, which probably should, but again, Russia is kind of short on those. If it just starts throwing in, mobilized troops into the meat grinder, which is totally fine, this becomes a resource drain again for the Russians. So they just escaped resource drain number 1, and they move to the resource drain number 2. Because if they don't send resources to the area, they will start losing this area. And if they lose this flank, that is it. That is threatening Crimea. That is no supply. That is really, really bad. Let's put it this way. Because Ukrainians can push them away from the Antonovsky Bridge, fix it somehow, and so on. They can make river crossings. So that's the part. And I just wanted to talk about this in details because it's kind of been on my mind for this couple of days, and I just wanted to express. But let's talk about the other things that's happening on NIMAP and what we can expect for the winter campaign. And I guess this video is going to be a little bit longer, but I just really wanted to talk about some of the things. Okay, let's talk about Melitopol and where Ukraine is going to strike. Whoa, oh, did I say Melitopol? Oh, how did I know? So yes, Ukraine is obviously eyeballing Melitopol. Blue for Ukraine. So Ukraine is definitely eyeballing Melitopol. Why? Because this is an obvious thing. So I need a larger map here. So what does Melitopol do? We already know that Ukrainians are creating some kind of threat to get this flank a little bit busy. Ukraine is also trying to defend against Russians around this flank. The only thing that is not in the area that is active is Melitopol area. And this is one of the crucial spots. What Russians kind of forgot about the fact that they have resources that they can use to attack Donetsk is that Ukrainians have also resources now to attack into Zaporizhia direction. Because while Ukrainians are, how would I say, Ukrainian army had more troops in the Kherson area than Russian. Remember, Ukrainian military is starved for equipment. So that means that their troops can be fully battle capable, especially assaults. They can perform on very specific directions. The Kherson front was kind of large and it was very resource intensive. So now I've heard calculations from 40 to 60,000 Ukrainian troops can be relocated to the Zaporizhia fronts, where Ukraine already has quite a significant grouping. An important thing to understand and know about this region that I'm showing you right now is that it's very different from the Kherson Oblast. So I'm going to put up a video here. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you've not. So this is a video about Humvee crossing some kind of a concrete irrigation channel, which it is. So these concrete irrigation channels are actually all over Kherson Oblast. They are here, there, everywhere. The point is, Kherson, as you can see how the vehicle was crossing it, it's essentially a protective barrier, like an anti-tank protective barrier. And these things in Kherson, northern part of Kherson, were pretty much on every kilometer. Now imagine advancing force. You are attacking through these like 1 kilometer every time. Is this kind of a irrigation channel? It is terrible for advancing forces to attack into this. You cannot execute any fast maneuvers like, deep. So deep penetrations are possible maybe only by sticking to certain roads. And now there comes the important part. These irrigation channels are very prevalent in Kherson North part. They are not prevalent in the south of the Zaporizhia Oblast or south of the Kherson Oblast. These, where these two circles are complete steppes. So once, and I mean steppes like full-blown steppes, like it's like almost a desert with like very little vegetation. There is very, very little trees or anything. So this becomes pretty much like almost like a perfect battlefield for fast-paced mechanized warfare. And we already seen that in the Kharkiv area that a fast-paced mechanized advancements are very much Ukraine's a go-to tactic by now, the thunder runs as they are called. So we should not underestimate the capabilities that Ukraine is bringing to the table. If right now on this direction, Ukraine just comes in with 40,000 extra troops, not just 40,000 troops, battle-capable troops that were fighting on Kherson Oblast, the attacking force, the attacking fist. And it brings on a lot of the artillery that was, again, very much concentrated on the Kherson area. Ukraine tried very hard on the Kherson to essentially concentrate everything that is able to fire. That's why actually Ukraine is kind of losing a little bit of, compared to what they took from Kherson, losing maybe a settlement, a village, a couple hundred of meters here and there around the Donbass is nothing even close. Like they took maybe a village or a couple of villages in Donbass, Ukraine got Kherson back without fighting in the city. That is perfect operation. But the point I'm getting into, we might see with the winter coming in and the ground finally solidifying, we already know that their colds are coming in already. We might see that these 40,000 battle-capable Ukrainian forces can strike, and they can strike quite hard. Now, Russia probably has some plans. It prepared some kind of fortifications. But Ukrainians are smart, and they definitely will. And some people said, well, but if the Russians are sending their troop to Donetsk, doesn't that mean that maybe Russia, can advance, take Avdiivka, maybe take Bakhmut here, and then, try to, advance to Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, make a big advancement on the Donbass? And my counter argument is, firstly, it's not going to be that easy for the Russians. We already know that. And secondly, if they do, so imagine Ukraine would lose Bakhmut, Ukraine would lose Avdiivka, but Ukraine would take Melitopol, Ukraine would take, for example, Berdyansk and encircle Mariupol, and then also start sieging Crimea. Would that, blue for Ukraine. So if Ukraine essentially frees this for Russians temporarily occupying maybe Avdiivka and is it worth it for Russia to temporarily occupy Avdiivka and Bakhmut? I think you might answer that yourself. With that said, this is just something I really wanted to talk to you about in the past couple of days. I'm going to try to make another video tomorrow, and I'm going to try releasing some more videos, updates as fast as I can. I have a lot of things to talk about. There's a lot of new information that I gathered, especially with the coming winter campaign. Thank you so much for watching. Big thanks to all of the supporters of the channel. And I'm again sorry for the quality of the sound. I'll try to make it better as soon as I can. Stay safe. I love you. Slava Ukraini.